The first lie is the I. And that's the one we're going to be concerned with here, because if you can get past the first lie that is the I, you are free. The I is a representation of what you are. But as soon as you fall into the belief that the I as a thought, as a representation of the self is what you are, then you have fallen into a false paradigm of reality. Are we willing to come fully alive? Do we feel alive, or do we feel deadened in our body and in our mind and in our hearts? How alive are we in the heart? How alive are we in terms of our creativity? How alive are we in terms of our connectedness with reality as a whole, with nature, with each other, with the energy field at all of its different levels of subtlety, with all of the information that's flowing between us now? How alive are we? Or are there things that we need to repress and to deaden and to not know about and not feel because there's too much pain that we're carrying, too much baggage, and that forces us to cripple our aliveness in order to deal with the traumatic traces of the past that we're still holding on to? Can people relate to that issue? When there is an overflow of negativity, and by negativity I'm referring to the anti-life feelings, the death drive, the wanting to die, the wanting to get away from it all, to not know about it, to not feel, to not think, to not relate, to want to escape, avoid, disappear, to want to deny, to want to pretend, to want to live within the confines of the lie. When we are doing that, then there is a deadness, to the point of becoming a zombie. And it's that kind of deadness that then has to be compensated by a false aliveness, a pseudo-aliveness of an ego that will keep its illusion of aliveness either through drugs or some other artificial stimulation, or pornography or other kinds of chakra 2 stimulus, or power drive, domination, dictatorship, demandingness, addictions of various types. But none of those can overcome the deadness, and it eats away at one. And eventually it gets projected out as a deadness, as wanting others dead, and as wanting to defile the other, to make them want to be dead, and to fall into such negativity that one turns life itself into something disgusting, something perverted, something evil, something that should not be. And this is one of those characteristics of the current social system that we're in. That this kind of moral perversion, because of the inner deadness, has become the norm. And those of us who want to still live in truth and in light and in authentic relationships with others will have a very hard time, because you'll feel that your sensitivity to experiencing the deadness and the perverse intentionality of the other, and the split, the dissociated fragments that may not be speaking but are actively engulfing the energy field with their negativity, are sticking to one, are filling one with a kind of negative energy that is usually below the level of our conscious understanding that something bad is going on, something that doesn't feel good or right or true, but we cannot verbalize it. It doesn't reach that level of consciousness in which we know what's happening, but we end up leaving a party or a conversation or a situation, and we feel slimed, we feel vampirized, we feel depleted, we feel as if something has been taken from us. How many of you have had that experience? So it's a very common situation today, and it makes relationships very difficult. And so what's important for us, I think, to understand in this retreat is how we got to a situation like this, because it wasn't always like this. And in fact, civilization could never have gotten started if people were like this a few thousand years ago. We have morphed. The ego today is not the same structure as it used to be thousands of years ago, when there was purity and truth and goodness and love, and beauty and joy and innocence and all of those virtues that now we're very cynical about. And we got here through a step-by-step shift in the logic of consciousness. And that logic created a fallen kind of consciousness. And once we have fallen into the kind of consciousness that is signified by the postmodern ego structure, we cannot even imagine other kinds of consciousness that are different, that are of a higher sort. And this is one of the problems when we try to think of how can we make the world better. We only think of it within the frame of reference of the ego itself. And that leads often to a kind of hopelessness or to a utopian, pie-in-the-sky, unrealistic approach, or to an approach that's still based on the ego and that is futile, because the amelioration process of dealing with the ego's perversion and psychosis and narcissism and its other neurotic pathologies is not doable. It's a technical problem that is not solvable by psychotherapy or by psychopharmacology or by any of the methodologies that are current. And in fact, we have come to a point where depth psychotherapy is dead. It's been repressed. You don't find much of true depth psychology anymore, whether Freudian or Jungian or Lacanian or Bionian or any of the others. The depth dimension is being denied. For the most part, it's a much more superficial approach to your problems that you're going to get when you look for help. And the spiritual approaches are pretty much also Band-Aids and New Age rituals and approaches that will give you temporary feel-good kinds of moments, or feel-bad moments, which could happen in a bad trip in an ayahuasca ceremony or something like that, which may also feel like, oh, you're uncovering something very deep and powerful, but it turns out it was an illusion created by the chemical. And although you may get something out of it, but for the most part you can't sustain it because it was owed to the chemical, not to your own inner work. And so it didn't increase your willpower, it didn't increase your discipline, your capacity to tolerate truth. and to maintain understandings of who you are beyond the ego in the light of day without having a prop to hold your third eye open for you. So our approach is different, and our approach is to face the truth of the false self that we are trapped in, that nearly everyone is trapped in, and that we are trapped in because it's collectively given to us. We're indoctrinated into this field of falseness. It's the social illusion that is the family system, that is the falseness of the relationship with the mother, the falseness of the father, because the fathers today don't uphold the paternal law, and the amount of the accuracy of love and of the relationship of love and dharma in families is not truthful, is not real. And the child knows it because children's moral compass is very accurate. And once they realize that there's no truth in the family system, they shut down and decide that they're not going to have any respect for it. And either they'll create a perverse hatred for it, and a hatred for law and for order and for systems and organizations and dharma, or the hatred will go into relationships, and the hatred will go into creating physical symptoms of suffering for oneself. But for most of us, even if we've done some psychotherapeutic work of some kind, because psychotherapy takes place within the same framework of the false self, we find ourselves frustrated and trapped and hopeless. The more work we have done, usually the more hopeless we begin to feel, because we think, well, there's no way out. I've done the ayahuasca, and I did 10 years of psychoanalysis, and and I did all these other things, and I'm still sitting in this same kind of maya. So what do you do next? Well, that's what this the approach of Sat Yoga is about. If we have the discipline to face the truth and to face the lie and all the different levels of the lie, and to come out of the lie. And as I say, this lie is a collective lie, and it's a lie created and sustained and worsened by the social system that, as it becomes more corrupt, has to lie to itself, to its members, to you, to us, in order to sustain itself. And those lies become more obvious. Eventually, the society doesn't even care that you know that they're lying to you. There's even a perverse joy in the fact that I can lie to you about this, and you're going to pretend to believe it anyway. Even though you know it's not true, you'll pretend that you believe the lie because it's too uncomfortable making waves, knowing too much truth. And so you can be a conspiracy theorist, and both in the background, but you probably won't speak too much truth about too many things that you know, because you know that the backlash is not worth it. And it doesn't matter. You can uncover the truth, and it doesn't even make any difference. There's so much cynicism. And people say, yeah, I know that, but so what? And that's really the mark of perversion. Yes, I know better, but I'm going to do it anyway. And once you're in that position, then it's kind of hopeless for you. Unless you're suffering so greatly that you have no choice but to come out of it because you want to still live, and you can't handle the wrenching agony of looking in the mirror or facing what you've done with your life. So these are the impasses that we face, but we have to get to what Freud called, and Freud stole it from Aristotle, he called it the proton pseudos. Okay, and for Freud it was the first lie that established hysteria, but for Aristotle it was different. It was the primary lie that created false premises that caused all the rest of your thinking to be wrong. Right? Just like in a geometry, you've got like in Euclid, you've got 5 axioms, and then everything else, all the theorems and corollaries are based on those. You change one of those and you have a totally different reality, which is what happened with Einstein. They changed one of those axioms in Riemann's system of geometry, and that parallel lines never meet all the way to infinity. And he said, well, yeah, what if they did meet? You know, or what if parallel lines had some other option for their destiny? And that change of axiom created the possibility of curved space, which made Einsteinian theory possible, and that set in motion a whole new wave of physics. Well, in any case, we can benefit from looking at the axioms that we take for granted and hardly ever check whether they're really true. But the primal axiom, the proton pseudos, the first lie, is the I. And that's the one we're going to be concerned with here, because if you can get past the first lie that is the I, you are free. None of the other lies need to be dealt with because they won't even happen, because they are logically posterior to the belief that you are an I. The I is a representation of what you are. But as soon as you fall into the belief that the I as a thought, as a representation of the self is what you are, then you have fallen into a false paradigm of reality. And what happens in what Jacques Lacan called the mirror stage is that the signifier of I, or yo, or je, or ich, or whatever in the mother tongue that you're given, the I becomes stapled to the mirror image and to the smile or other gaze of the mother that cements in this identity. I am the body that is given its validation by the other, and that I live in a plane of signifiers, of language. And that's my natural habitat. A speaking body. And once that becomes your identity, then everything after that follows as a matter of trying to keep this body alive and happy. And it's happy when it's one up on others. And therefore, what it has to learn to do very early in life is to lie to its mother and father and siblings and teacher. And the more it can get away with lying with a straight face, the more it can get its desires met. And so that tendency to lie to the other, that often requires one to lie to oneself first, creates a psychic economy of the lie that isn't questioned, and that becomes part of the jouissance of the functioning of the ego. But the ego itself is a lie, because what you are is consciousness that is anterior to the ego, and that did not need to create an ego. It did that as a function of the desire of the mother. and then of the father, because they wanted to be able to call you by a name and tell you, give you orders of what you were supposed to do. Of course, it turned around that you gave them orders after a short time, and you took over the family system. But nonetheless, it was a method of control. And so the ego's whole point of its existence is to control others and control situations. But the problem is it has no control over itself. And once these various programmings are in place, and they are repressed because it's too uncomfortable to know the deception that's going on, then those programmings act autonomously. And one feels now without free will, in the sense that there are irresistible addictive objects and irresistible repulsions and anger and reactivity that is not any longer in the control of the conscious mind, because so many false ideas and fantasies of who we are and what we want and what we deserve and what we feel about others that we don't want them to know get repressed in the unconscious, that the unconscious mind and its processes control us. This is what Ramana called the satarivu, the split mind. And so we have a conscious mind and an unconscious, and the unconscious itself is split into different parts, and the conscious eventually gets fragmented into different personalities and sub-personalities to deal with different situations, because you have to be somebody different to your teacher than to your mother, or later to your wife or your husband or your boss. And so you develop these different personas and different ways of relating in order to lubricate the social system and situations. But what happens is there's no central self that's coordinating and organizing all of this. And so the coordination falls also into the territory of the censor that controls the unconscious mind. And then our lives are more or less on automatic pilot. If we want to take over, because we have allowed this false intelligence of the ego to take over our lives and usurp the sovereignty of our consciousness, we will find resistance. And we will find that this usurper that we gave permission to usurp our lives for, because it worked for a while, it helped us deal with an adverse situation. When we want to take back the power from it, it says, oh, no, you gave that up. No, you're mine now. And the ego will assert its own right that it has gained through squatting on your unconscious and taking it over. And you gave it permission, and what can you do now? You lost your deed to it, and you threw away the key. You don't even know how to get into your unconscious. You have no idea what you're really thinking, even at this moment. Maybe there are clues, maybe there's some kind of fury going on, or pornographic fantasy image or something else, but for the most part, you have no idea what's going on in your own unconscious. That's why you have to hire a psychoanalyst to tell you, It's a terrible thing, when somebody else knows better what's in your own mind than you do. And sometimes you get clues from your dreams, but that requires interpreting them because they're coded, so your censor wouldn't stop you from remembering it. And then you've got to learn the code. And that also is something that there's a lot of resistance in doing. So we're locked out of our own operating system. And we need to hack it in order to transform our lives. And to do that, we have to become anonymous. Which means to have no I. Only that way can we get in there and take Hal's memory banks and take him out of control of our spaceship. So if you're interested in doing that, I hope that this retreat will help you to accomplish it. That's my purpose. That's the purpose of Sat Yoga. That's what we're here to do. And we know that this is a very difficult job and requires a very heroic perseverance and a willingness to outthink your own mind in a chess game. And it's a matter of life and death that you win. But the problem is you're identified with your own enemy most of the time. And so you don't even want to win. And you think that losing is winning. So this is a tough situation we're in. But it can be won if we are willing to face the truth at a bodily level as well as a mental and emotional level. Because we know when we're out of sync with the truth. If we really feel it, something in our gut will tell us we're lying or we're not facing something, or we're falling asleep at a certain moment and don't want to hear something, or we're tuning out some important information, or we know when there's a defense mechanism that's operating. If we want to know, we can know that. And when there's a defense mechanism operating, it means that, your enemy wants to keep you from getting power over it in this situation, and this could be crucial. So we have to start looking at those games that our ego is playing against us and being able to outplay it in order to gradually gain, again, the self-sovereignty that we have lost in adopting these ego pseudo-identities as if they were real. So I'm going to stop there for this evening and open the floor and see if this resonates with anyone.